Good evening and welcome to Talking Point. I'm your host, Dr. Corey Wright, coming to you live from the studios of the Broadcasting in Accra. We come to you live this and every Sunday with issues of national concern, and we engage you in discussions for informed decision making. We're also streaming live on GBC Ghana Online, on Facebook at Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, and as always, we welcome those listening to us on Unique 95.7. Talking Point is brought to you tonight in partnership with ATL, who are sponsoring my outfit. The fabric provided by ATL was custom made by Haylooks Unisex Fashion, located at the Palm Wine Junction on the Gifford Road. In his first Independence Day address on March 6, 2017, the President of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, informed the nation that on his way to the Independence Square to deliver his address, he had stopped to cut the sod for the construction of a national cathedral that will address, in his words, the missing link in the nation's architecture by providing a church for national purposes. 4 years later, questions persist about the nature of the project, its funding, and its relevance to the nation. Tonight, we tackle the many voices and concerns raised by Ghanaians far and wide, voices questioning the necessity and relevance of the cathedral in this time of economic hardship, voices that have crystallized into one critical question: should the cathedral be a national priority? Our guests will address this pointed question, as well as share with viewers and listeners what they believe to be the missing link that points to the relevance of the National Cathedral to the nation. We encourage you to join in tonight's discussion by sending your messages during the show to our WhatsApp number 055-744-6429. With me for tonight's discussion is on my immediate left, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. Honorable, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And on my far left is Opoku-Mensah, CEO of the National Cathedral Project. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So if I can begin with you, Honorable. 1 hour goes very fast, so I just want to dive right into the issues. Right. So the President of the Republic spoke at the inaugural Africa Lecture at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. last month. And one of the things he said then was that the construction of the National Cathedral is, in quotes, a priority of priorities for the country. Why is this project so important to the President and, by extension, Ghana? And why should it be important to Ghanaians?
Yeah, thank you very much. He did, and I was there with him when it occurred. And truly, I guess the questions that are being asked, goes to the heart, in my mind, of who we are as a people and the recognition of what God has done for us since our independence. So for him, it is important that we show gratitude to the Lord for how far he has brought us, and all of the benefits that we have accrued as a nation. That's one. I think in there too is a recognition that 70% of the nation are Christians who embody certain beliefs, and I think the Supreme Court ruling also did mention that over 90% of us, are quote-unquote religious, and therefore it's the nation's responsibility to build the infrastructure to support, what our beliefs are, and that's important. And the issue of finding a monument to memorialize God, finding an architecture that I think people get a misconception that the cathedral means only church services, but really creating a space in which major national celebrations can occur there, which will bring the type of unity that we envisage that our country needs going forward. Okay. So it is important.
Okay. So, Professor Opoku, did you want to add anything to what he said?
I think we almost undervalue this whole question of national unity and cohesion. If you look at our politics now, it's almost retrogressively partisan. Even our church is denominationalized. So, an infrastructure like this allows us then, between the denominationalism of the churches and the partisanship of our politics, to really have the space where you have these solemn occasions of state that then allows you over time. In fact, over time, the identity of the nation. The president talks about 2005 when he was in Washington, at the Washington National Cathedral, as the foreign minister, and went to the Washington National Cathedral for the funeral of Reagan. And the U.S. politics is almost as hot as ours. And yet, on that occasion, you had all the former heads of state coming together. You have all the leaders of Congress in a very solemn. We downplay that. And part of his own decision that the country needed something like this actually was formed at that period in 2005, long before he actually became the president.
So then let me ask you this. Why is this National Cathedral, that's supposed to be a symbol of unity and peace and cohesion, why then is it generating this angst among the populace?
I think, you know, Doc, actually, if you trawl through social media, the issue of national cathedrals, you know, seems to generate in modern times this type of discourse. But the questions being asked, you know, are one, you're a secular state, why are you getting into this? And really, is that the question, you know, because that really the Supreme Court has answered that if the nature of the people are religious, then it's incumbent on government to have the infrastructure to do that. And I think there are, you know, three pillars of nation building with regards to the political independence, which, you know, our first president did and led to Africa getting independent. The second one, of course, now has been sort of investments and trade, and to get into economic emancipation, which through Nana Akufo-Addo, we now have the free trade agreement headquartered here. So we get in these two pillars. And the third clearly has to be our spirituality. And so with that third leg, we cannot grow and sustain our transformation without a holistic view. And I think we need to understand that. Then the question, at any point in time, do you have enough resources to do X, Y, or Z? We even questioned when we were coming into government whether we had enough resources to do senior high school. We questioned that. I think to date, if my numbers are correct, we've spent about, the government has spent about 30 billion CDs in terms of our expenditure. I think this year we have spent maybe 25 million CDs on the National Cathedral, which is 1/1000th of what we do. Now, if you begin to look at the total, look at this tripod, at any point in time, we should be making progress toward it so that we have a holistic way of developing in a sustainable way. And strongly we believe that there are, beyond the economic benefits that I can outline as a finance minister, is clearly the issue of building a righteous state in which then the Lord promises that all these other things are added on to you.
Well, let me ask this question then, because the current macro indicators, inflation, COVID, Ukraine war, all of these things are going on right now. And there's the concern that in times of volatility, maybe one should not be engaging in ambitious projects such as this. I know you mentioned here that it's I forget the fraction.
1/1000th of what we have done.
But many people are saying that should we be persisting in doing such a project now when we may have places like Kolebu who obviously need rehabilitation, when we have children still sitting under trees rather than in classrooms? Why this priority when there are so many others out there? I think that's the question that people would like.
I think it's a fair question, and therefore the statistic I've given you will indicate how much we are spending. The question is, if you are building a holistic society for growth and development, should you not take care of all the elements, maybe in different proportions? So let's say the Cathedral of Milan took 200 years, you know, and others have taken 3-4 years, Yamoussoukro, etc. So maybe that will be the debate, but to actually think that that part of our life is not necessary, it's cutting away the soul of the spirit of the country.
I think the question may be not that it's not necessary, but is it necessary now? I think it's the question they're asking.
Yeah.
I think the issue it has been started.
Yes.
I mean, so you're in a project and there's a crisis. I mean, do you abandon all the projects? And so the finance bill talks about proportion. But to go back to your angst, I mean, so why is there this whole national angst about the National Cathedral? I think it's really a misunderstanding of the nature of a cathedral. I think most people think, look, we have almost 30,000 churches in Ghana. Why another church?
So tell us, why? What is different about this church? Why is that so? You know, I know there's a Bible.
And is it a church?
Well, a cathedral. It's a national cathedral or a holy place. However,
so essentially, I mean, I think that's where the issue lies.
Yeah,
because it's first and foremost, it's really a sacred space for the nation. And if you look at all nation building projects, including our own chieftaincy civilization, you have sacred space as part of nation building. In the country, you talk about the Gonyadem, where the nation calls to prayer. You have the Baimu, where the chiefs and the leaders of the nation are buried. All that infrastructure really are almost the infrastructure around which ultimately the rituals that happen there is really what builds that sense of nationhood. And so you have Macron saying after the Notre Dame burned, saying, look, the Notre Dame is really the epicenter of French national life, because that is where the rituals, because you have the infrastructure for the executive, you have the infrastructure for the legislature where we debate. We've opted for multi-party democracy, so there will always be debates, and it's legitimate.
And it's not cheap.
Right, exactly. And then the executive is the ruling party. I mean, and so you really always need this sacred space. You have that space. And for me, one of the times it hit me was during the funeral of Kofi Annan. I remember there was this memorial service at Legon. And after the memorial service, literally an announcement was made that begging people not to come to the conference center because there was no space for people. And so then it begins to ask, for a nation building, don't we need the infrastructure for occasions such like this? So for instance, I remember also J.H. Nketia, Professor Nketia's funeral, it threatened to rain. It was the forecourt of the State House. I mean, so all these things, these are the practical nation building activities, rituals, if you call it that way, that the country has lacked. And that's why the president says, look, this is the missing link in the nation's architecture. That space for almost effect to our belief in God, but secondly, really addressing some national rituals, the formal religious activities of state. And then we talk about it has a national crypt where our leaders would also be buried over time. You go there almost to recount your history, because the leaders there really are reflection. But I can explain further what we have done to almost move it away from the church, but also it's a church for national purposes, national Thanksgiving service. We do that all the time. And in addition to all this, you also have that space where then you have national church services, and the president talks about the fact that it also becomes a symbol of the Christian presence and contributions to this country.
Yeah.
Okay, so Honorable, the Deputy Minister talked a lot about the fact that this investment is something that one could recover in 10 to 15 years through tourism.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Yamoussoukro. So I wanted to point us to Yamoussoukro, where they built a basilica for about 11,000, I believe, people. And they also anticipated that there would be tourism and there would be funding, and that hasn't occurred. So I wanted to figure out, how are we fashioning ours to ensure that this idea and this hope that we have of tourism dollars or tourism cities is actually going to be realized?
Right. I mean, the issue, Doc, for me is that Ghana remains that green space a different entity, always really punching and above its weight. It still remains sort of the democratic center on the continent, and we've basically proven to be pretty resilient in all of these things. There's always an outlier. So you have Yamoussoukro to Israel, and I was there 2 weeks ago. A week ago. And you look at 4,000 or 5,000 years of history and the Wailing Wall, and see 4 or 5 million people coming through each year. Some $6 billion or so each year, and it happens, all the time. So the question is whether we can ourselves position us in a way in which I think we have about 600 million Christians in Africa. Just in Africa,
it's 50 at the moment,
who cannot maybe go to Israel. Can we create this as a center for that type of pilgrimage? That's easily about $2,000-3,000 spent per person that comes through. We have a whole African American diaspora. The U.S. I think diaspora about 1.3 trillion of consumer buying power. But I think we kind of belittle once I get into the economics. So for me, certainly, I ascribe to the heart of the matter with the president saying that we need the space, first for thanksgiving to God for where we have come, and then also create a national place of symbolism for unity for us to go on. But as a finance minister, I'll by all means look at the numbers. We'll usually say, well, what is the internal rate of return? And we'll do the calculus. And here, the calculus is pretty clear to me. For about $350 million that we are going to spend over this period, it's not only sort of a space called the Cathedral that we have a Bible museum, and we have biblical gardens, which then sort of creates a destination for people to come to. Answers the Yamoussoukro question. It's not just a place to go and pray, but to celebrate issues as Paul has mentioned, and to also bring serious learning on the issue of biblical truth to us and create a center. At this point in time, Doc, Africa is becoming, the main source of missionary activity globally. So once you create a center of this nature, you're going to have a whole attraction of African Christians coming through for intellectual dialogue to understand where we are going, what we're going to do to it. So the critical question comes is, should we or should we not? And I keep saying that you can't cut the third leg off and expect a sustained growth. Now the question about how you then fund it, and what is it that the state can afford, and therefore in looking at the strategy that trustees, there's mass mobilization locally, there's external push for that. There are the churches who have to do that, so that, like the cathedral that was built in Milan, everybody participated. And I think it's important, for us Christians to look at the opportunity at this time to be part of building a monument or a celebration to God for what He has done for us. And it's quite clear, in Chronicles, so we can assume that He's chosen us, all of us, not only the president, and to be part of this enterprise. And how blessed we are to be alive to participate. So my challenge really to the churches and we as citizens is that, what is it as we have a culture of gratitude? Why should we, if we feel so strongly about reducing state allotment of resources to it, why don't we do that so that we can say that we built it as a nation?
And let me actually follow up on, I think that was a very excellent question about how are we going to be sure that actually traffic actually comes to the country. And we've actually done two things. One was to look at the question of, how do we, beyond the formal religious activists of state? How do you make the cathedral relevant to the church and Ghanaians, Africans, and Africans in the diaspora? And so the Bible Museum we are developing is a museum that, yes, kind of explores the Bible, but has a systematic focus, the role of Africa and Africans in the Bible. This is a story that has not been told, and so we really want Ghana to be the center where you can really come and explore that. But it's not just in the historic sense. About 2 weeks ago, after the president's visit to Washington, at Baylor University in Texas, the Institute of the Study of Religion, they have the largest database on religious activity. And almost the current, almost resurgence activities in Christianity, led by Africans, is not registered. Not in Africa, not in the US either. And so they were even excited that, look, if we can create that data here, they would even send their people to come and study it. So literally what we're trying to do is like, we want to drive the traffic. We want to be able to develop the infrastructure in a way that drives traffic here. Another one is the African Americans. Part of the, we're talking about the fact that we want to look at the Bible not just on the continent, but how did the Bible also influence the dispersion of Africans? The Bible was used as a tool to almost dehumanize the African slave, but then the Bible also became the instrument around which they built community, around which they built the leadership. The black church became a central actor in fighting. That story has not been told, so we're actually teaming up. Just about 2 weeks ago, once again, I was with some black American church leaders, and exciting that, look, if you can do this, there are already churches in the US who are willing to start sending people here, because that story has not been told. So that's one. The other one was what we did just in Israel. That, look, we want this to be, the museum to be almost, we want to create almost Africa's Christian metropolis. That means that part of the museum should be able to have the kind of artifacts that tell the Christian story. Just last week, Friday, I was with the Israel Antiquities Authority. I mean, at their warehouse, I mean, millions of artifacts dating from Abraham to, and they're willing to give, it will be the first time that these artifacts have left Israel to Africa. The only place it's gone is Europe and the US. And so part of what you do then, if you're able to bring all these artifacts here, you almost create the incentives and to drive the traffic here. So those are the elements we are putting in place. We have the biblical garden where you're going to have the trees and the shrubs and the flowers of the Bible. And so somebody, it's almost like we are bringing the Holy Land to Accra, basically. And so what happens then is somebody in Nigeria, Zimbabwe, says, look, I really have theological students, my church members have never seen the sycamore tree. Ghana has it. They have biblical Bible museum where you have all copies of the Bible. I mean, every Bible that has been translated in African languages will be here. And so that then begins to be the instrument, the incentives around which you drive the traffic, leaving that to chance. You have to. We are building the structures to ensure that we actually drive and collaborating with institutions that allows us to begin to drive the traffic to Ghana.
Okay. All right, so Honorable, I think everything is just being amplified now because of the climate in which we are, the economic climate in which we are. So I wanted to read you a December 2019 article from TRT World, and they talked about how to create, this is another thing that a lot of people are talking about right now, that in creating the space we had to demolish the passport office, we had to demolish the houses of the Court of Appeals, which was next to Parliament. And outside the fact that maybe Accra is already choked, some conversations have been started about why couldn't we have found some place on the outskirts of Accra, driving traffic, job opportunities, what have you over there. Why was it important? What was it about the site? Why was that site chosen to house the cathedral? Why was it important that it be located where it currently is going to be located?
Yeah, but I think, and really, of course, that's water under the bridge, so it's neither here nor there. But if you look at Accra, look at where Nkrumah Mausoleum is, where the old Parliament is, and then you twirl around, come through the Roman Catholic Church, the museum, come down to the SU building, Ridge, you get to Liberation, you move towards Parliament, then you also have the Conference Center, and back there, of course, is Independence Square. So that clearly it's a very important place. The question then is, if you have this type of architecture or monument that you build, doesn't it fit into that, sort of logic or ecosystem that we are trying to create? And I think that's a relevance of it. But I guess, we can play with the numbers all we want, but we need to be clear about what unites us and what it is that you build. At any point in time when these buildings were being built in Europe, was it ever the right time? But is it important to us that we thank God for what He has done for us? And that's the very spirit of the Ghanaian. And so why are we excluding that? How do we fund it? Then becomes the question. And the question then is, are the executive mindful of current situations so that how they do that? Would we also encourage citizens to see the importance of it, link it to their own spirituality and contribute to that so that it is built? But we should not snuff out, our religiousness or spirituality because we are poor. The Lord will understand if, a widow's mite is put in there. But by golly, we should never think of season. And I think, for me, that's a disappointment in the dialogue. The Supreme Court has already, stated that, for a religious country of our nature of 90% there, government is responsible for infrastructure that pushes that. So that question is asked. How are we spending money from state coffers? This year, less than 1,000. Is that too much for a nation to do because we are politicizing? I think those become, the questions that we ask, that do we truly want to stop it? And really, for a GDP of some $60-80 billion, tearing down some houses, etc., to create something to thank God for what He has done is too much? It will be my question to that. So what then is important to us to keep us as a people for that national cohesion and to respect our spirituality going forward?
Well, we have to take a quick break. This is Talking Point. We are talking tonight about the National Cathedral. We'll be right back. Please stay with us. Welcome back. This is Talking Points on GBC and GTV. I'm your host, Dr. Ofori-Atta, coming to you live from the studios of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. Our topic tonight is the National Cathedral, a national priority. Our guest in the studio, the Honorable Ofori-Atta, Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. He's on my immediate left, and on my far left is Dr. Opoku-Mensah, the CEO of the National Cathedral Project. So you wanted to add something?
In terms of the location, I think the President actually talked about the fact that it was really the purpose that determined also the location. If you want to have presidential inaugural services there, the President is sworn in Parliament, you move the whole city to... So it's really, and that's why if you look at the National Cathedrals almost everywhere, they are really close to the centers of power. Westminster Hill, Abbey comes really to mind. But also the architect, really proposed that what Ghana really lacked was a monumental core. You know the US and the whole mall, and people come from all over, school children, because that is where the monuments, the nation building infrastructure are all located. That we lacked that. It started with Nkrumah, and we did not complete it. And so this really almost allows us to begin to create this monumental core for our nation building. After 65 years, we almost need to just look, if we want to be a nation, these are the elements of nation building, and this allows us then to of building a monumental core for the country.
Okay, so Honorable, I know you tried to let us understand the importance of focusing more on the spiritual and the aspect of things rather than the monetary aspects of things when it comes to the cathedral.
He's the finance minister.
Actually, that's not what I said. What I said really was that it is important for us to put resources into it. Now, the question is how we do that, and I outlined, the strategy that the trustees have come up with regards to mass mobilization, private sector, diasporan interventions, and the churches to participate.
I guess what I meant was that you were trying to let us know that it shouldn't deter us from pursuing.
Absolutely not. And as Finance Minister, Minister of Finance, I'm looking at our resource envelope, we will then be able to determine, how much we put in at any point in time, and that is sensible. Okay. And so year to date, as I mentioned, we spend maybe 1/1000th of our expenditure on that, and that's what I mean. But I'm very confident about the ability to raise resources within the Christian community, within the general population, and outside to be able to fund this. Okay. And then more importantly, if I were also to look at really the economics of it, I truly see an overwhelming capacity to be able to pay this off, in short order, with 600 million Christians on the continent, with the African diaspora population, and with what I see in other places such as Saudi and Israel, etc. I'm confident that we will also be. Typically, I'll look at an internal rate of return when I'm doing that, and I think this one, Doc, I'll look at an eternal rate of return. So that should be put in mind. Okay, but I think we should be very particular about minimizing the importance of our spirituality to our nation building and the need to give glory to God.
So, but I wanted to ask you about an issue that some members of the NDC have been talking about recently. They've indicated that the constitutional provisions requiring accesses or withdrawing from public funds have to be with parliamentary approval, and that they were not followed in the case of the disbursements of some of the funds. Is this something that you agree with, or is that an accurate statement, assertion?
I truly do not understand that. Okay. Because I did go to Parliament and indicated that there will be from the government to do that. I don't. So I don't want a sense that there's less anything more than integrity in what we are doing in this. and the issue of a leaked letter. What is a leaked letter?
Exactly.
You know, I send a letter to controller, and he goes through his process and disburses per certain regulations. But I worry, you know, when we take on issues like this, spirituality especially, and God at the heart of what we believe in as a people, for a certain amount of degradation. It's worrisome to me, because I feel these are things that we can talk about, and whether it is really true, what is being said, it's worrisome.
Okay. So, Dr. Opoku-Mensah, I wanted to ask you, we've been trying to, you know, not call it a church, a national cathedral, but also in share that this is just not going to be a place where only a service is done, but it has a larger purpose. But there is the Coalition of Muslim Organizations. This was in 2018, so excuse me, they may have changed their minds by now. But one of the things they said when this was being proposed initially was that they said, just as the government of Ghana has not been involved in the construction of religious edifices for Muslims, traditionalists, Hindus, etc., it should not be involved in the efforts by Christians to build themselves a cathedral. And then one of the Muslim activists, I think his name was Bahiratu Kamal, said that the cathedral doesn't reflect a national unity in any way, since it is specifically for one religion. How would you respond to this, so that the understanding is there that broader agenda, a broader goal of this cathedral, this edifice for national interest?
Right, okay, thank you. I mean, I don't know whether they will say, the first thing really is that the state has always been involved in religion in this country. And we don't want to equalize it. I mean, it's not, the president was very clear that, I mean, our nation building is really located within the Judeo-Christian tradition. So the president is really not imposing one religion. It's just simply that that's how we're colonized by the British. So we kind of inherited some of the institutions, and so kind of most of our institutions, including Parliament, by the way, is really located within a certain tradition that we've inherited. And so, but in addition to that, it's the fact that now 70% of population really have become part of that Judeo-Christian tradition. And I think it's critical to stress that not decide to build themselves a national cathedral. I mean, really, and I think that there's this idea that it's a private, no, it's a state, and that is why the first thing we did was, look, how do you, in addition to the formal religious activities, how do you really make it relevant to the nation? So the idea of the Bible Museum, which includes, so what happened when the Bible came to Ghana, for instance. I mean, so we had all these churches, but that's not all. We had all the activities of the churches. So you look at the Bible and education, the church and education. If you went to Fantapem, you went to Adesadal, if you went to Opoku-Mensah, it's not only Christians who went there, but it's become, so even the cathedral allows us almost to begin to look at our history and the forces that have shaped our history. So it's really part of our heritage, including, for instance, if you look at the development of our culture, languages. The museum is going to have all the Bibles, part of the languages that have been developed through the church, the Bani, almost all there. So even Muslims go there and they see their heritage, the school they went to, the hospitals that came about with the introduction of the church. If you go to Nalerigu in the northern region, in fact, until recently, the only hospital there was the Nalerigu Baptist Hospital. I mean, it's not just Christians who went there. And so, and all that will be documented at the cathedral. And so it really becomes part of our heritage. Looking at, there's another element, but once again, I don't want to, like the National Mosque. I mean, the state was involved in it. It really, but it is. You don't want to begin this kind of conversations of equalizing. We don't want to pit. We are working together. The administrator of the National Mosque and I have had discussions. We are working with them to get some artifacts from Turkey, because some of the sites are actually based in Turkey. Constantinople was in Turkey. Ephesus is actually in Turkey, and so the Turkish government, which supported the building of the National Mosque, is responsible for this artifact. And so we really should be careful not to pit Muslims against Christians. It's critical that the Supreme
more
Court
recently, I guess the Imam
even
donated,
right?
I mean,
so the key issue for me is that the nation is realizing the importance of this infrastructure, both for Muslims and for Christians, as a way really of building cohesion in a very, very regressively partisan society. I mean, the fault lines, if I remember, there was this article in 2008 in Foreign Affairs, we talked about, title Can Us and Them, the triumph of ethno-nationalism. It talked about the fact that the triumph of, the peace in Europe was brought about because they carved nations out of tribes, ethnic groups. So the French had France, the English. But the key lesson, though, was that for African countries, which had been carved really through kind of so many ethnic groups, the challenge, the central challenge, was going to be cohesion. And you were going to see more ethnic conflicts, civil wars. And so then it becomes so critical that where we can congregate as many of our population as possible and create the needed cohesion, we do it. And really, for me, that's the key issue beyond what we've done to really make it a national space.
Okay. All right, so there are lots of questions coming in, so I wanted to just go ahead.
Very good.
So there's one from Anthony Dome. It says, I do not believe Ghanaians in general hate the project, but there is the need for government to be truthful in the amount spent on this project. Would generate their own resources to build, but now the government is raising funds to build. If it's government project, let's be clear in that direction and do the right thing.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good question. I'm not sure where the misunderstanding was. I mean, I was in Parliament talking about seed money. I think the nature of what the cathedral is part of the museums and Monument Act and Board, so that's there. The question really is if the trustees are going out raising money, should government support that in that sense? Should a Minister of Finance or a Minister of Religion be part of that? And I don't see that as something that we should not do. And the vision of the President as articulated by Paul is quite clear. So I think we should really all be putting our shoulders to the wheel to do that. And with regards to resources we put in there, the executive and the minister decides on that, and we go through Parliament for approval before anything is used. So we will do it with discernment and discretion.
Okay, so I think there was an article sometime or late last week from the former Secretary General of the Christian Council, Dr. Opuni, who said that he was originally part of the board, I believe.
No, he wasn't.
He said, Dr. Opuni said the Minister for Religious Affairs clearly told the trustees that the President would give the land and the churches would mobilize, with government facilitating the mobilization process for the fund. So I think that idea out there has been answered by the question you asked. And then this is Ecclesiastic 8:9. You can give food to school children that you are seeing, but you can build a national cathedral to a God that you cannot see. Ghana can't afford a national cathedral. Ghana owes a lot of debt to the World Bank. When is Ghana going to clear all those debts? Government hasn't paid NAPCO, national service staff, school feeding caterers, nurses don't have jobs, graduates can't find jobs. We hear of many factories being built by the MPP. How many Ghanaians are employed in all those factories? The last 6 years, MPP hasn't managed sanitation and water efficiently. Ghana is flooding badly with many citizens' assets being destroyed. Deaths occurred. Plastics have choked our gutters. God has already blessed humans with knowledge and wisdom. We need to use the wisdom wisely and efficiently. Definitely building a national cathedral is not necessary to most Ghanaians. There's no name on this. This is a request we get every time we have a show.
Right.
Yes, okay.
So since you're here, I'll tell you, Mr. Minister, please pay the NAPCO workers. This is from Malik from Kaswa. Every time we have a show, this message comes through.
Okay,
so
it's a good one.
Yes.
The question I would ask was the NAPCO. We came into government and then, created this 100,000 opportunity for 3 years, in which people were supposed to learn, get skills, and then move out to do their own thing, to say it, but to give them that break. We don't seem to be seeing that type of transition after doing that, and now we're moving into entitlement and etc. So I think we all need to put our shoulder to the wheel, get more entrepreneurial, which is really the theme of the whole budget, and really confront what it is that we have to do to create a more robust and sustainable and transformed economy. That's all the issues of the Youth Start program that we are having, the issues of taxes and therefore e-levy, all of those come together to address these issues. But to say that one part of it should not be done at all, I think will be a disservice, since all those are important for sustaining nation building.
Bidiako in Kumasi, in as much as I support the building of the cathedral, I disagree 100% with its siting. Is Ghana only Accra? Couldn't we have cited that a place like Intampo, the center of Ghana, to move investment to other parts of the country? Let's see here. Good evening, please. I'm Zach from the Ashanti region. My question is, I hear they're importing all the sand and gravel which will be used to build the National Cathedral from Israel. How true
I'll
is this?
explain that. I mean, it's okay. I'll explain that. I mean, really, most of the great cathedrals have always tried to make a link to the source of the faith. The Cathedral has its foundation stone from Bethlehem. For the great, they will say, look, we are bringing Jerusalem to. It's really a way of connecting. Spiritually, kind of symbolically to. So we just actually brought a foundation stone from Jerusalem.
Not the gravels or something like that.
But I want to get to this issue of, is it state or private? I think the president was very clear. This was a national monument. It was a legacy for the 60th anniversary. And if you look at it historically, nations have always used these anniversaries to build their stock of monuments. And for my first part of was the Queen's 25th anniversary, when this Jubilee line was developed to commemorate. We did the 50th anniversary, we built Jubilee House to commemorate it. So he said, look, the National Cathedral was going to be one of the legacy projects, including the Presidential Museum. So it's really a state monument. But
I think the initial language surrounding it has created what we are still seeing.
But what he said, and which he's not actually gotten credit for, is really almost introducing a new model. That look, if we are going to build our infrastructure, can we introduce a model where those who are going to maybe disproportionately benefit from it also contribute? And so that's why I said, well, I'm going to ask the Christian community to also support. It's almost, for me, part of the attraction is that it almost begins to offer us a model to move away from aid dependency, because aid is really just a dependence on external partnerships. But if we can begin to develop our domestic partnerships with domestic actors like the church and others, we're on our way to almost rethinking the social transformation.
And this is from Alhaji Dawuda Medina Estate. After construction of the cathedral, when opened, teachings of the Decalogue, the Apocrypha, and the teachings of the Canticles and Songs of Solomon. Everything.
In fact, that's the whole. In fact, the Bible Museum, we're talking about the Abrahamic faiths. So it's really, if you look at the Bible, almost 60% of the Quran is really derived from the Bible. The Jewish. So it's really going to be almost a Bible museum also for the Abrahamic faiths. So all the literature, the antique Bibles and everything will be there. Yes. So everything will be there.
So there are about 5 or 6 questions like this. So I'm just going to summarize them, Minister, and ask you. They're talking about a personal promise that the President made to God to build a cathedral, and how that personal promise translates now into a national initiative. So that's why I said the initial conversations around this
but that's right. I mean, I also think it speaks to a certain misunderstanding of the nature of the. It's a Republican democracy. That means practically every 4 years we give almost all our power resources to one person whom we've elected. And so that means the person's vision really becomes a national vision. I mean, almost by default. But in this particular case, he says, look, this is something that the nation lacks. A gesture of thanksgiving. It's also a presentation of the Christian presence. I'm also a Christian. I am a Ghanaian, I am a Christian, and so I made that promise. So it's really, I think, if we locate it within the kind of political system we are we operating, it makes absolute sense.
But I think we should extend it beyond the personal issue.
I wanted to read this before you go. This says the National Cathedral is very important for the nation Ghana. Bringing God to the center of governance will bring sustainable development through proper morale in nation building. This is from
Yeah, and I think, you know, I mean, during campaigns or whatever speeches the president gives, I mean, when he articulates something which says that, you know, of all that the Lord has done for us, when I'm in government, you know, this will be one of our priorities. So it's you know, it's a royal we, where you say this is what we should do as a nation, and it is through that he gets voted for. He captures the spirit of what people are feeling and the gratitude that is due the Lord. So I don't think we should personalize it as he went and sat somewhere and told God, if you give me this, then I would, you know. I think we should move into appreciating, you know.
A final question. Good evening, Madam Host. My name is Ajua. Please, I'm referring to the Finance Minister. National Cathedral is very good, but schools that I mentioned that study on the trees, what is he doing about that? Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that was Ajua.
Yes, that was Ajua.
Ajua, I'd love to talk to you. But in truth, I mean, I think, you know, we look at 2017, we look at 2022, we see how far we have come and how far we have to go and what we are doing to be able to do that. Surely there are various gaps. We know what COVID did. We know what the Ukraine invasion has done globally. And we all acknowledge that. We know what imported inflation is doing to us. But yes, we must be doing something to avert that. But let us make sure that we sort of cross all our T's and dot our I's and make sure that we move in tandem of all of the pillars that builds a strong nation. And the spirit of the nation cannot be undervalued, you know, and monetized, because it is that makes us distinctly different. So once again, we should think about the eternal rate of return. Know that we will manage these resources well.
Now, eternal rate of return.
And as to year to date, as I mentioned, I think we spent about 25 million Ghana cedis, but the government has spent over 31 actually billion Ghana cedis in our expenditure. So
what is the anticipated total cost for this project, the National Cathedral?
Yeah, I think it's meant to be about 350 million over that period.
Cedis or dollars?
Dollars. And the expectation really, as we said, is that we'll be right in pushing for private sector, church mobilization, Ghanaian citizens understanding the appreciation that they must give to the Lord to support that, but government always in the background to ensure that the process moves on.
And what is the anticipated completion date? Is it dependent on the fundraising?
Everything is always dependent on fundraising, you know, as you say. We expect and hope that March 6, 2024, we should be able to do that. And so we need to get aggressive about supporting the trustees to fundraise outside of the system. But truly, Ghanaians also embracing, you know, this opportunity truly to be part of building something to glorify God for what He has done for us. Because I think it's clear. You know, let's seek ye first kingdom of righteousness, and all of these things will be added. So we can't not fulfill that part. And we have to have faith, but beyond the faith is also that the numbers are palpable. 600 million African Christians, 143 million Africans in the diaspora. The examples in other places like Israel, Saudi, etc., indicates that a well-articulated strategy will really bring back the resources to pay for that.
So my father was an Anglican minister, so allow me to go back in biblical knowledge. I'm hoping I get it right. But you remember David had wanted to build the church, the temple for God. And he told him at the time that, listen, you have fought the wars, so but I will make your son do it, and that will be a legacy unto you.
Right.
And then when you get to Solomon, when it was ready to be built, there's a section in the Bible that talks about the fact that wealth flowed into
everywhere.
Everywhere. Wealth isn't flowing right now.
Well,
so
so the question is faith, huh?
Yeah,
when do you stop?
The question is probably when do you start? And the starting was from David already, with the faith and the belief and the conviction that this is going to be done. And so I guess my point is that even if we don't meet the March 24th, the
March 6th, 2024.
Yes. Because right now the things you mentioned, the war, all those things, one could even equate that to some of the things that were happening in those days.
Right.
No, but let's correct it though. The issue, God did not allow David.
He had fought all the wars.
He had bloody.
His blood was bloody. Yes.
Yeah. So
I know. I don't mean that. I don't mean it that way. What I meant was that there were things that were happening that were critical.
There's a season for
exactly,
right.
And that wasn't
so is this the season?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the question that.
I think look at it though. I mean, I think what Solomon did was really a preparatory phase. I mean, David also. So for us, really, what we've done, the integration of the museum just in May, we had a meeting with the team. It's now that they've actually finished the concept design. I mean, so now if you show somebody, look, there's going to be a Bible museum, you have all the concept and the design. So literally for me, really, this is where we've actually finished the preparatory work. And that is my point, that the work that is being done would live on irregardless. Right.
Because in this country where we have a practice of going through on other people's projects, the handing over between David and Solomon is what I'm really getting at in terms of tying things in, so that no matter what happens, the next person will be able to has the foundation to continue rather than cut it off because of the history that we have in this country.
But we also believe that given the kind of like all David did and handed over to Solomon, we've done enough preparatory work that now an aggressive fundraising, because you see that even for the fundraising, I remember one of the chairman of the board of trustees was telling me even for him is until we finished the design of the Bible Museum that this thing became so relevant to him. And so I think we're now going to have the July 4th to 10th is the National Cathedral Week from the churches. And so as we begin to introduce all these elements, I believe we are really at the cusp, really, of that major breakthrough we need in really prepared to work.
But I think the bridging that you talk about is important, so there's continuity, and therefore the issue of the strategies that the trustees have come up with, in terms of the mass mobilization, so that it takes it outside of the ambit of government supporting and building it. And if those infrastructures are strong, then you have a continuing fundraising mechanism which then brings money in, and that is what the colleges in the US do. A constant setup of 24/7 fundraising, let us out, getting the Christian community to be part of it, or anybody who is religious, tapping into our diasporan community, the Christian churches on the continent, so they feel that this is a place they are going to come to as a hub, so that we don't really continue to focus on government is going to build it.
And then also
Yeah.
I mean, if 70% agree that we need this, no government can change it, really.
So with Yamoussoukro, they had all these agitations, but at the end, there was this statement that was made by a 63-year-old businessman who said, it's incredible to think that today this is a place which inspires prayer and soothes the soul. So as we wrap up, what are your final thoughts about what you hope the National Cathedral will stand for when it's all completed for Ghanaians? I'll have you
I think for me, really, it's really this idea that as a country, we've always hinged our transformation on God. I mean, really that we are a deeply religious country. Our national anthem is a prayer. In fact, the first verse is almost a prayer. My hope and what I'm fighting for, why I'm on this, is really that as a country we begin to, almost this is what represents us. In fact, it almost becomes our gift to the world, basically.
Yeah, but I think it's true. Our national anthem, you get the first expression of our nationhood. God bless our homeland, Ghana, and make us great and strong. So we should live by that. And I truly believe that God will bless us by doing what we are doing, and that we really should be unapologetic about that. You know, the Supreme Court has made it very clear that this is an infrastructure that the state, you know, should support like all other infrastructure that's needed for our people, and so that should be done. Would government be sensible in the way in which we spend money on that? Obviously, even this year you can see where it is. Should we compromise, you know, a third of our being, you know, the political independence, the economic emancipation, and our spirituality because we are too? No, we should find a way to phase it in and make sure that it is done. Would we always go to Parliament to ensure that there is transparency in how we do that? We surely would do that. The President's promise, it is quite clear to me that he captured the spirit of the nation and say that we, royal we, will build a monument to thank you and commemorate what you have done for this nation. On that note, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us on tonight's Talking Point. A special thank you to my special guest, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, and Dr. Paul Opoku-Mensah, CEO of the National Cathedral Project. I'm Dr. Nimright, and this has been Talking Point. Thank you so much again for sharing your Sunday with us. Good night, good luck, and please be and take care. Till next week. Thank you.